Madam President, I am going to take the prerogative of President Pro Tem to speak because I know the distinguished Republican leader has already spoken, and I, of course, would have yielded to him had he not. Madam President, it's always hard to say goodbye to friends, especially one as good as Senator Shelby, and one with whom I'll walk out of here arm in arm. But I'd say, Madam President, that we have to think about the time when this body and nation are as divided as ever. Senator Richard Shelby's tenure exemplifies a commitment to cooperation and fairness. I've seen that not only in his public life and what we see on the floor, but I see it in meetings we have in his office or my office, quiet meetings with the two of us, knowing we'll always keep our word. And so I would say, Madam President, at the conclusion of the 117th Congress, the Senate will lose a skilled leader and a true senator of his word. That has been the way with our decades of service together. Senator Shelby's legacy, one marked by his intellect, his integrity, will undoubtedly persist in this body and throughout the country. My great mentor when I came here as a junior-most member of the Senate was Robert Stafford of Vermont. Senator Stafford was Mr. Republican from Vermont, and he took me under his wing. And he said to me, he said, Patrick, always keep your word, but you'll find you'll be the best senator if you learn to work across the aisle. If you can work with people of integrity, both Republicans and Democrats. And you will find among both parties you will develop close friendships. More than a fellow senator, I'm proud to consider Senator Shelby one of those great friends. The reference we've seen before to distinguished Republicans and Democrats, of course, we're all called distinguished senators. But we consider in my family, in my house, some more distinguished than others, or for different reasons. And devotion to public service is ingrained in Senator Shelby's character. After he obtained his Juris Doctoris, Senator Shelby served as the Birmingham City Prosecutor. I always like senators who've been prosecutors. And an Alabama state senator. I never got elected, opportunity to be elected a state senator. But he began in '78 his congressional career by serving Alabama's 7th District in the House of Representatives. And for the last 36 years, Senator Shelby tirelessly served Alabamians in the Senate. Personally, when they think of who they look to him. And he's been fortunate to serve with some very good senators from his state, been friends of mine, a couple on the floor today. But he built an impressive resume. He served in the Senate Appropriations Committee and the Intelligence Committee and the Banking Committee and the Rules Committee. And on the Appropriations Committee, Senator Shelby fought to allocate federal dollars to key institutions and infrastructure across Alabama. But he did it openly and honestly. He should take great pride in his reputation as a leader who has truly improved the lives of his constituents, something senators should do. And as two of the most senior members of the Senate I worked alongside Senator Shelby for decades. We spent countless hours working to pass the annual appropriations bills. Together, we negotiated the end of the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. And I remember, Senator Shelby, you and I sitting there and deciding, okay, we have an agreement, we're ending the longest shutdown. And we told our leaders, our Republican leader and our Democratic leader, that we'd worked out an agreement, and here's the details. And they said, if you two have worked it out, that's good enough. And within hours, the longest serving shutdown ended. Senator Shelby coming on the floor announcing it was me having the honor of joining him. We also share memories from traveling the world together on a variety of key diplomatic missions. Now, during that time, we had long discussions, candid discussions, open discussions. Thank God discussions did not have a record, as we discussed what could be done better and should be done better in the Senate. We formed a great friendship. Our wives, his wife, Dr. Annette Shelby, my wife, Marcel, also had that friendship. And Dr. Shelby was able to quietly give history lessons on every single place we went to, and would have, and you remember this, Senator Shelby, these senators and spouses who are with us of both parties would just sit there and quietly listen to Dr. Shelby, Professor Shelby. This came in very handy once in a visit to Cuba, where the leader of Cuba, President Raul Castro, was looking at us with suspicion, concern. Dr. Shelby talked about the Cuban students he taught at Georgetown. And you remember the whole atmosphere changed. And we all got along well after that. I could say so much more, and I will later, but I wish both you, my dear friend, and Annette the best in the next road in life. I will miss you. This will not be the same place without you, and it makes my leaving here that much easier. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
The junior senator from Alabama.
Madam President, as we near the end of the 117th Congress, we're also preparing to say farewell to some of the body's most dedicated public servants. Among those is Alabama's own Richard Craig Shelby. I've known Senator Shelby for many years, but I have most enjoyed getting to know him as a colleague and a friend in Congress. You know, his help and guidance have been invaluable to me since I came to the Senate 2 years ago. It was quite the transition from college football to politics, but I jumped into the ring because I cared deeply about the future of our nation. And I realized very quickly, so does Richard Shelby. My transition to public office was supported by some great advisors who shared my belief in America. Chief among those allies is Senator Shelby. Even though he's a lifelong Alabama fan and pulled against me for 10 years, we still became friends. Congress is like a football team, has a lot of great players in different positions, but to come together, form a game plan, and get some wins for our country, those players need good coaches. Senator Shelby has been one of the best. Born in Birmingham, Senator Shelby graduated from the University of Alabama and the Birmingham School of Law, becoming a city prosecutor in Tuscaloosa. For all my Auburn folks back home, at least we can all agree that Senator Shelby is one of the finer things to come out of Tuscaloosa. Senator Shelby has represented Alabamians in Congress since 1979 and has served in the Senate since 1987, always keeping an eye on the future and the other eye on the people he has been serving. To say Senator Shelby committed his career to the betterment of his state and the nation would be a huge understatement. His retirement is well earned, and his work should be celebrated. So today, I want to honor the countless hours he has spent fighting for Alabama and the many achievements he has championed for the betterment of all Americans. Senator Shelby's work has hit almost every corner of Alabama. Number one, his focus on national defense, manufacturing, infrastructure, and education will be the hallmarks of his legacy. First, Senator Shelby's commitment to our state's defense industry is second, and I mean second to none. His support for America's military and his belief in the abilities of Alabamians cemented our state's role as a leader in America's national defense infrastructure. In nearly every position he's held in the Senate, he's used the tools available to bolster our armed services and utilize resources Alabama offers. More recently, as chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee and its Subcommittee on Defense, Senator Shelby delivered billions in crucial defense funding. His efforts helped significantly expand the capabilities of Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama. Redstone Arsenal has grown from a U.S. Army base to a collection of crucial facilities for our national defense and the federal government. The resources and responsibilities secured by Senator Shelby for the Redstone Arsenal increased its capabilities, missions, and its tenants. And behind the fence at Redstone Arsenal today, we have the Army Material Command, Army Aviation and Missile Command, the Missile Defense Agency, NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, the Missile and Space Intelligence Center, and the expanding presence of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Under Senator Shelby's leadership, the FBI's presence in Alabama will be its second largest, only behind here in Washington, D.C. Along with myself and the entire Alabama delegation, Senator Shelby has also been instrumental in the work to permanently relocate U.S. Space Command to Redstone Arsenal, a move we hope to applaud after an official announcement by the Air Force in the very near future. Second, thanks to Senator Shelby's commitment to bringing jobs and industry to Alabama, our state has also grown into one of the country's leading manufacturing hubs. After a visit to Germany by Senator Shelby in the 1990s, he played a key role in bringing Mercedes-Benz and their suppliers to Alabama. Fast forward a couple of decades, and today there are more than 40 German suppliers in West Alabama alone. The impact of the automobile industry and migration has been huge for the workforce and the economy, thanks to Senator Shelby. He was also crucial in recruiting suppliers for Airbus and its South Alabama manufacturing plant in Mobile, which added hundreds of millions of dollars to our economy and created thousands of very, very quality jobs. His work to establish manufacturing centers at universities helped make Alabama home for many aerospace and defense companies, resulting in thousands more jobs and countless opportunities of growth. And third, that growth would not be possible without solid infrastructure, which Senator Shelby has helped build for decades. Alabama's vast and unique geography present certain challenges for infrastructure and many opportunities. Senator Shelby's ability to both foresee challenges and imagine opportunities has made him an invaluable tool throughout our state's growth. A lot of that growth has stemmed from our state's coastline and the port of Mobile, one of the largest in the country. And now the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is working on a project to deepen the Mobile Ship Channel, allowing bigger ships to navigate Mobile Bay. With Senator Shelby's guidance and support, the Port Authority and terminals have steadily expanded the Mobile terminal, making it one of the fastest growing in the nation. As a key player in the Senate appropriations, Senator Shelby has secured many dollars for Alabama's infrastructure, upgrading highways, airports, and bridges. So fourth, all this growth in defensive manufacturing, infrastructure, and more would mean nothing without the talented men and women who serve our military, lead our companies, and pioneer the new industries driving economic development. That talent and those are cultivated through education, and Senator Shelby believes in the value of quality education, even at Auburn University. He's a product of an Alabama public school and a state university. His personal experiences instilled in him a deep respect for the role of public education and a desire to make it the best it can be. To make sure our state was on par or leading other prestigious educational institutions, Senator Shelby fought to support and invest in Alabama schools. He's delivered hundreds of millions of dollars to Alabama's universities to build math, science, and engineering complexes. These top-tier facilities have helped to bring students and experts from around the world to Alabama. Today, Airbus works closely with the University of Alabama's engineering program, a relationship that is the perfect example of connection between primary education, talent, and economic opportunities. Senator Shelby understands that relationships and its benefits as it does his wife, Dr. Annette Shelby, a decorated professor and a lifelong education advocate. That understanding has driven his priorities throughout his career and helped Alabamians along the way. There are a lot of big personalities, big decisions, and big egos here in Washington, D.C., but it takes commitment, humility, and patriotism to make a difference in the lives of others. Senator Shelby is a giant in the Senate, and because he never forgets about the things that matter the most, the little things, the things that are most important to everyday Americans back home. They have supported him for decades because he has always had their back. As we bid farewell to Senator Shelby, I encourage all my colleagues to honor his legacy by following his example. Put your family, your country, and your principles first, and the rest will fall into place. We all know public service is not just a burden of time and an effort for the servant, it's also for their families. So, to Dr. Shelby, thank you for your steadfast service to our state alongside your husband. And to Senator Shelby, thank you for your mentorship over the past 2 years. I will use these lessons learned by serving you with the rest of my time in the Senate and beyond. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senior senator from Missouri.
Madam President, a moment ago when I saw Senator Shelby and Senator Leahy shake hands warmly in the middle of the aisle, I thought immediately, it's a century of service in the Congress. It's a century of learning lessons that, fortunately, they've both been able to share with us. I mentioned in my farewell remarks the other day, Senator Shelby and Senator Leahy, and how working with both of them on the Appropriations Committee and the Rules Committee, I'd learned so much from them. But I was reminded today, I've heard a number of these speeches in the time I've been in the Senate, and I don't think anybody's ever reminded us quite so well of the oath we take. The oath we take to the Constitution, the oath we take to do this job as well as we can, the promise we make, frankly, to find a solution. And it's a lot easier in Washington these days, and in the Senate these days, it's easier to find a fight than it is to find a solution. You know, we kind of fallen into a place where so many people now run for office talking about what they'll never do. And frankly, when you start talking about what you'll never do, that usually takes you out of the conversation of what can be done. And if anybody here has been a determined participant in finding what could be done, it's Senator Shelby. And now, that certainly does not mean that he gives in easily. And many times I've been asked by other members and the press, well, what do you think Senator Shelby's thinking about this final deal? And I say, I don't know what he's thinking, but I know he's thinking. And I know we're not going to find out what he's thinking until he's ready to tell us what he's thinking, but he's trying to figure out a way to come to a conclusion that can actually solve the problem. And in the appropriating process, that problem's usually keeping the government in business. And, you know, the other thing I've noticed, especially about Senator Shelby, is how often he's willing to share things that he hears from his family. His older sister used to, I'd hear from, well, I got advice from my older sister, and I must think, I'm wondering, well, how old is your oldest sister? But so I'd usually ask to be reminded of that. But I'd benefit from the advice too, you know, and just like his sister was calling him and saying whatever it was they were talking about that day, he was always talking about his sons and always talking about Mrs. Shelby, you know. I have such great respect for her. And he'd say to me, he said, you know, you're married to a strong woman too. And I said, yes, I am. And he said, we'd better not forget it. And he hasn't forgotten it, nor has he forgotten to appreciate her and brag on her and understand what an important part of his life and his career she has been. I hope I've learned something from that as well. And then Team Shelby is just pretty good. You know, Richard's surrounded himself with people that have stayed in his working orbit. Maybe they go from one committee to another. Maybe they stay right where they are, being sure they keep him on time. Maybe they find out that if you're going to travel in a way that absolutely reaches the diplomatic conclusion and the helpful conclusion for the country in Alabama it was designed to make. And so I've always been a big respecter of Team Shelby as well. And I was particularly impressed to watch Team Shelby, whether they knew it or not, they just produced their own senator. You know, I think Katie Britt's going to be a great member of the Senate, but one of the reasons is she was such an important part of Senator Shelby's efforts here. He'd listen to her, she'd listen to him, and when it came time to step up, I don't think any member in the Senate that I'm aware of has ever made a greater commitment to try to be sure that they were replaced by somebody that would do the best possible job of following their legacy for the state. It's been wonderful for me to get to be on that Appropriations Committee and the Rules Committee and work with Senator Shelby, but also all the many times we've had just to talk about what's going on that day, what was going on with his family, what was happening with the staff. I'm glad to be here today and share with him how much I've benefited from the great friendship we've had, but more importantly, the great example, and to be reminded again of our oath to the Constitution and the importance of being a problem solver rather than being the person who always wants to talk about the problem. Richard always wants to solve the problem, and the country is better for that, and so is the Senate. I yield back.
The senior senator from North Dakota.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to add my congratulatory remarks and thanks to Senator Shelby, our senior senator from Alabama. And for me, he will always be the chairman. He has been certainly my mentor, and I think the senator from Missouri and others would say the same thing. He's been our mentor on appropriations, in my case for 12 years. And I would have to say, to me, it's amazing how well he understands the process. Of course, he's been at it for a while, but how well he understands the process, how well he works it, and then the people that he hires are so good. And that's something that we have to work with as chairman of the subcommittees, is our chairman as well, or our staff administrators as well. And in working with Chairman Shelby, we're always able to get just absolutely the very, very best people. So it wasn't just his staff director for the full committee, but the staff directors that we had on our subcommittee. And I think the Senator from Missouri would back me up on that. We were able to have such good people who really understood the process very well also. And that's incredibly important in appropriations, because you've got all these things that are authorized, and then we have to figure out what to fund and how to fund. And not only that, but how to get those bills passed at the committee level and then ultimately passed across the floor. And of course, everybody has a tremendous interest in what's in those appropriations bills. So it's not just the process that he understood so well and worked so well, but his understanding of people. And he wasn't the person who always talked, and he certainly wasn't the person when he talked who talked the longest. But I've always believed that sometimes the person that can express a thought in the most cogent way, in other words, express a full, complete thought that's appropriate at the time, that actually makes the point in the fewest number of words, actually shows the keenest intellect. Try it sometime. Try saying as much as you can in terms of something important and making a point in the fewest possible words. It truly does take a keen mind. And the chairman not only had a keen mind for the policy and what needed to be done, but also working with people. And I think maybe that, is something I appreciate even more, is that when you work with Chairman Shelby, he took the time to understand what was important to you. And then to the best of his ability, he would try to help you accomplish that. Now, if you kind of thought, well, that's pretty good, I think I'll go back and try to get a few more things, sometimes he'd have to remind you, that you got to prioritize. And he might remind you that, boy, you're kind of pushing for a lot there. And in that respect, gave you perspective. And that's important too. That's important too. But for the things that really mattered and for the things that you needed to get done, he really took the time to work and make it happen. And that might not happen in one cycle. That might be something that he would recognize, okay, I get it, this is important to you. And we maybe can't chop that tree down, with one swing of the axe, but you know what, we'll keep working on this, and I'll work with you on it, and I'll mentor you on it, and we'll get that done. And he gave you the confidence that it actually would happen, because you knew he was going to stick there with you. And I guess in return, you had to try to make sure you were doing your part. And in that respect, that'd be the one other point I would mention, is that doing your part, he also understood there were times that you could accomplish and do what he wanted you to do and vote with him, and that you probably should. But then he also recognized there's times when you can't. And, he accepted that. And I think that takes an awful lot, too, because there's a lot of type A personalities around here and can get a little demanding once in a while. And I think he understood both the leadership and the idea of, okay, let's get something done, but then also sometimes understanding that, you had to make a decision that might not be exactly what he wanted in that situation, and accepted it. I guess the final point I would make is I really like sports. I've always enjoyed sports. Now that I'm an old guy, all I get to do is watch them anymore. But Chairman Shelby, he likes sports too, and as anybody that knows him pretty well knows that he's somewhat partial to the Tide. He's kind of an Alabama fan. Now, that might be because he played football for Alabama, and I don't know how many know it, but back in the day of Bart Starr, who obviously was an incredible football hero for the Green Bay Packers, I remember as a kid watching him win the first 2 Super Bowls with the Green Bay Packers against the Chiefs and the Raiders. And so when I got here and found out that Chairman Shelby had been a tight end on an Alabama team where Bart Starr was the quarterback, I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. But we as a result of that, I think, I always look to talk to him about sports. And I'd talk about the North Dakota State Bison football team, and not surprisingly, he'd talk about his beloved Alabama football team. And so I have to say, probably most people, when they watch the Tide play, and that seems to be pretty frequently, for a national championship or important games, they think of Bear Bryant, Coach Bryant, the coach, and how he kind of got the whole Alabama football dynasty going. And that's another thing that's interesting, that Chairman Shelby knew Bear Bryant and worked with some of Bear Bryant's other really great players like Joe Namath and a few others. So I love hearing those stories. And I will have to tell you that not only now, but for as long as I'm around, I always take an abiding interest in watching the Alabama football team play. And while most people probably think, when they think about icons, and they're watching the Alabama football game, they go, oh yeah, that Bear Bryant, didn't he start something amazing? Isn't that an amazing dynasty? Matter of fact, I got to do one quick story, and that is, we like to kid the chairman, and so one year, Alabama had a particularly good football team, and a story we're kind of teasing him about is, hey, did you see the new football rankings came out for college football? And, we'd say, well, who was number one? And so he'd say, well, Alabama, of course. And they'd say, well, who was number two? Well, Alabama's second string. And they say, oh, that's great. How about number three? Well, that's Clemson or somebody else. And they say, okay, well, how about number four? Well, that's Alabama's third string. So we like to tease and have fun. But whenever I watch the Alabama football games now, I don't think about Bear Bryant. I think about Chairman Shelby. And I think about all the amazing things that he has done in Congress, in the House, and in the Senate. Not only for Alabama, and he's done quite a few good things for Alabama, but he's done an awful lot of good things for this country. And I think where the rubber really hits the road on so many of these things, this legislation can get authorized, whether it's defense or anything else, but it's got to be funded. And so if you really look back at the length of this gentleman's career in the House and in the Senate, and what he's actually done, and all the things that he's been a part of and been involved with, it's monumental. It's iconic. It's a big, big deal. And we're going to miss him a lot. So I just want to say thank you to Senator Shelby, to his wonderful, beautiful, classy wife, Annette, from both myself and my wife, Mikey. It's been great working with him. I hope we see a lot of him in the future. And congratulations on just an incredible career in the United States Congress and Senate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.